All right, guys. So it's not very often where we bring on a guest who has been in an entrepreneurial family for over 5 generations. They sold multiple businesses. They've worked with Fortune 500 companies, worked with Tony Robbins. And the guest we're bringing on today is absolutely phenomenal because there's a lot of insight that you're going to learn on what it takes to have a high performance CEO, a high performance team, and also how to appreciate your team in a way that's only going to help you in your multiplier during an exit. Watch this. Welcome to this episode. We got Justin Block here. Fired up to have you, man. So I heard a lot about you. We got introduced by a mutual friend, and he just spoke the world about you. I had a chance to kind of research you and look at the amazing things that you've done. But for the audience that isn't aware of you, can you give us a little bit of an intro of yourself and your background, if you can, please?
Yeah, sure. And I appreciate you guys having me on. Again, my
Yes,
name is
sir.
Justin Block. I'm from Jacksonville, Florida. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an investor. Come from the food and beverage background. My family's been in food and beverage for a long time, so that's sort of the thing I tell everyone. But I invest in a lot of businesses from many industries. But yeah, love all things business, love all things personal development, and excited to get into it.
Yes, sir. You know what's interesting is with our guests we like to send out like it's kind of almost like a little bit of a brief survey, and one of the things that you mentioned I thought was like really fascinating because it was talking about being something outside of your title. So, who are you kind of outside of that title that you just said?
Who am I outside of my title, man? I when it comes to identity, I think that's a loaded question, but I don't like to pigeonhole myself into a box. But for me, I think outside of, again, a title is just a title. That means a bunch of different things to a lot of people. CEO can mean, obviously chief executive officer. But in one business, they could be the head guy, but in another business, the chairman's the head guy or the president's the head guy. So I'm not the biggest guy in titles.
Mhm.
But outside of business, I think I'm a lot more than just a businessman. I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm a friend. So I like to not limit myself when it comes to that kind of stuff, but that's why I think I do all this personal development work.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. Where I think there's a lot kind of on the other side of that coin where people live and die off of their title when it's not. It's like that. Like that's the thing they're striving for versus being like impactful, kind of on the other side. Um, one of the things that you talked about, just kind of in I guess like social media is that great people make a great business. What shaped your philosophy around that mindset?
That's really just how I grew up, man. Like I said, my family comes from the food and beverage background. I can tell you a little bit about the history. So on my dad's
Yeah.
side, I come from 5 generations in food and beverage, so over 100 years. My great great grandfather had a food business that he built and sold. My great grandfather had a business that he built and sold. My grandfather had a business that he built and sold. We just had our second exit of our last company, and my dad even sold a dent removal business prior to that. So a lot of exits, and so there's a lot of business learnings that comes with that. And even on my mom's side, my grandfather and his dad, my great grandpa, had an exit in the printing business. So I just come from a lot of entrepreneurs, I guess. And so just growing up, it was sort of just beaten into me, I guess. Learning, watching, being in the companies, just understanding like, hey, you can't do all this yourself, right? And so, when you hire good talent and you let them do your thing or let them do their thing, things grow, and you sort of got to let go to grow. That's sort of how I look at it. But I think in order to get good talent, you got to be worthy to be worked for. So it's sort of like a double sided coin. Like you want the best talent, but like why should they work for you? So that's why I'm big into like reading and getting better and learning all the time. But it's just sort of how I was raised, and then seeing a lot of what I didn't like, because I think too there's business is just people at the end of the day, right? Like when someone goes to buy your company, they might be buying your assets, your IP, but they're really buying the people that are running the thing day to day. With AI nowadays and things changing a little bit, that might change a little bit, but I think it was just from a young age and growing up, that's just what I learned.
Well, I'm curious. Why do you think exiting businesses has just been so prevalent in your family? Because it's an interesting pattern. But whereas normally most people they'll say, "Let's get a family business and hold on to it pretty much forever."
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think I've ever been asked that before. I don't know, honestly. I would just say I guess the timing, the offer was good. I don't know. I think it's just, at least on my dad's side, we like to build things, we like to solve problems. And I think at least I noticed this within myself. Like I like a lot of different things. So it could just be like genetically, we're like, all right, we're doing one thing, then we want to do another thing, or it's just the right time. So I honestly don't know the answer to that question, but I wish I had a better answer for you.
No, good. When you're saying that the culture is obviously a big part of the company, and looking at an exit, how many, what percentage of business owners do you think maybe don't get that focus right? Like you said, they focus on the IP, creating all the systems, and then they don't really look at culture as maybe a lever to pull when they're looking to actually exit their company.
That's a good question too. I would say honestly, I haven't looked at every business, but I would say most, because most businesses don't sell. So I would say, and I think there's a lot. That's a loaded question too, because people's one thing, but the whole package has got to make sense, right? But I would say for the most part, I think there's a lot worse leadership out there than there is like good leadership, in my opinion. And so I would say majority of businesses probably don't focus on that enough, because again, like I said earlier, I think you have to be, if you want great people and you create a good culture in your business, you got to be that person to, create that within your own business. It all starts from the top, in my opinion. And I think, when it comes to, if you want to sell your company, you got to have everything in place. Like it's got to be, for the most part, when a buyer comes in, they're hoping to sell it maybe again or hold it for a long time. But yeah, you need to have that whole package set up, and, people is a big part of that. But I think, if everyone had great people, everyone would have great businesses and big businesses, but that's just not the case.
It's so interesting. So what I'm hearing you saying is that, in order to really sell your business kind of the right way, there's a big leadership component that most people just do not appreciate. They're not grinding into that the same way they are maybe with their sales. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's just really hard for people to wrestle with maybe some of the demons that they have internally? Where like, look, great leadership means you have to force yourself to kind of overcome some of the things that you're struggling with so that you can be a proper example for other people. Kind of unpack maybe your thought process around that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, entrepreneurship is probably the greatest vehicle for personal development, because there's always challenges, right? Like someone quits, you lose a customer, you thought you were going to get the customer and they back out last minute. Like all these, like challenges just happen. You're trying to move into your office, and like you move into the office and the pipe breaks, and it's like the whole thing floods. Like you could go on and on, right? And so I think it forces you to face yourself. And if you can't overcome those challenges, it's just going to be that much harder for you. And so I think, again, when it comes to growing a company, again, you can't do all of this yourself. If you are the CEO, founder, whatever you want to call yourself, like you probably have your hand in a little bit of everything. But I think, again, a lot of entrepreneurs, at least in my opinion, that are maybe doing, a couple 100,000 a year, maybe a few million a year, and they want to scale, they need to start hiring people, and they need to let go of things. They can't keep running the sales team. They can't keep running the marketing. They can't keep doing HR, accounting, finance, whatever, right? And so it just comes with letting go. And I think that's hard for a lot of people, because again, it's losing control. And I think if you are more of an entrepreneur, you're probably a little bit of a control freak sometimes. At least the ones that I know are. And so, yeah, it does make you face yourself and be like, hey, like, am I doing as much as I can? And again, I think a lot of people aren't even aware of that, or they don't want to admit, like, it feels weird to let go. Like it feels like paradoxical. Like if I give this up, will my business grow? And that's when, again, like 80% of what someone does is probably just as good as 100% of you can do, but you're probably so spread thin, you're not doing as good a job as you probably could if someone else was doing it. So I think there's a lot to that. But again, when I'm looking to build a company, it's like, how can I go find the best people? And that's just how we've done things, and how I'm going to continue to do things going forward.
Yeah, when it especially when it comes to like family too as well. Like we've had a couple of guests where they've done some where it's like a group of brothers where they are overseeing like 300 something employees, and it's like a business, and it's so different when it's like, all right, when it's not my sibling, it's not my dad, it's not my brother, it's not my sister, right? It's a stranger that I brought on to do a job. There's expectations of that job, and they're not hitting it, and it's just like, you cut it. But how is it different? Like when you're trying to do that very same thing, but it's a close family member. How are those dynamics different, and how did you guys make sure that everyone is on the same page as far as like what the goal is and roles?
Yeah, no, it's challenging, man. Like I think, mixing family and business can be tough, and it is hard because you might be at the office one day and then you see each other at dinner and it's like, are we just hanging out? Are we talking business? And like we actually developed this thing where we would be like, with me and my dad, because I work with my dad. He'd be like, all right, I got my dad hat on, or I got my CEO hat on, and like our work hats on. So we'd like do that, so we would know, right? But yeah, it's tough because again, I know a lot of families out there too who they struggle to work with each other, or they do have success, and then the money breaks them apart long term. So I think it is really important being aligned, and it's family business dynamics could be a whole freaking podcast in of itself. But I think it's playing to each other's strengths. So like what my grandfather did was he actually had everyone take personality tests and like psychological tests. So like
Which
Myers-Briggs,
ones?
stuff like that. And like we would
Myers-Briggs.
basically, yeah, like figure out like who's more good at like, being the CFO, CEO, and like, head of sales. Like that's what he did for my dad and my uncles who I work with. And then I think that's a great way. Honestly, I think every business should do that so you can just understand each other and everyone else knows like how each other's works, which is great. I'm a big believer in that kind of stuff. So that's something that we did. And then it's just, if the family member's not doing their job, it's hard for me to speak about that because, ours, like we all work together pretty well. But there were days where like, it doesn't go, it's not fun. There are fights, stuff like that. Like, I've gotten fired, I've quit, I've came back. Like it ain't just like all sunshine and rainbows. It's up and down. And we've all had that experience within the company. But, at the end of the day, we're your family. So the way I was raised is just like, we all get each other's back at the end of the day, but
Yeah.
it's not easy. And I think, again, yeah, you just got to know what the end goal is. And it's like, hey, if we are trying to grow this thing and sell it, but I think, again, getting clear on what you want is a very challenging thing in and of itself, and then aligning that with everyone else, because again, you're dealing with humans, can be even more challenging. So
That's a
again,
good
a lot
one.
to that.
That's a good one with what you said. Is that it sounded like your dad informed you of what hat he was wearing. So in other words, like he set a boundary. Like, hey, right now I got this hat on. So however you want it, I'll give it to you with this hat on. Dad, CEO hat. It's really good, Dan, to kind of have boundaries because family or not, we don't really see that very often.
No, I mean, I'm actually just thinking of my own parents getting divorced because they worked together and they would, well, not they, but somebody would bring business home when the business hat was off on the other person, and it's just, it creates a lot of conflict. Like you said, it's just you don't know when is it appropriate to talk. You have a fight at work, and then are we bringing that home, or how do we separate that? It's like understand. I mean, it's just truthful. It's like you're having a massive argument at work, and then you're having dinner, and somebody's rehashing it. It's like this is separate from that, but it's hard for people to kind of differentiate some.
It's like, oh man, you're fucking up the marinara sauce just like you did the TPS reports this morning that I wanted. So
that definitely is what it could turn into for a lot of people. So there's definitely, like you said, having some boundaries is important, to maintain it. It's very easy to kind of let the lines blur, so to speak. I'm curious, with regards, I love the fact that your grandfather, I think it was, had you guys do personality tests as a family. But when you're, we obviously hear about that a lot. Like we use it, but what would you say if somebody's like, all right, like I've heard about the Myers-Briggs or DISC or whatever. Like, how would you tell somebody to actually use it the most effective way within their company?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, I think it's just understanding yourself. I think the game of life is knowing yourself. And I think if you can understand yourself more, you show up better for other people. And so if we can all understand each other too, plus we're understanding ourselves, everything flows a lot better. So if I understand like, hey, like you're a little bit more analytical, again, I think the job of a leader is to meet people where they're at. It's not just to like, people say be yourself 100% of the time. And to an extent, I think that's true. But like, I think you got to be respectful and meet people where they're at so you can, again, deal with whatever situation you're in. And so if I understand like this person's more analytical, I'm going to approach a situation differently. So it just gives me a little bit of a profile. And I think if, your coworkers, your leadership understands how people operate, it's just, again, understanding other humans. And I think, again, being able to read people, being able to, understand like, how people are showing up that day, like the soft skills, that's very, very important. Again, nothing you were taught in school, but that I think is one of the most powerful things in business and that the good leaders do is they understand people and they can, I don't want to say influence, but they can lead them in the right direction. And I think, understanding how everyone operates is extremely important.
yeah.
I was gonna say, would you then tie that into the aspect of understanding the goals of your employees? Because I know it's something that you touched on. I tend to agree that a lot of managers, directors, owners, whatever, they don't really fully understand what are the goals of the organization. Do you tie that into that aspect of, the soft skills and what have you, or?
Yeah, I think this is something that probably most business owners don't do actually. And for me, it's one of the most important things too, because if I understand your motivations and what you want, selfishly it can help me because I can help you get to where you want to go. If I have an employee, like for example, Bob, he wants to make $100,000 a year and he wants to buy a house one day, right? It's like, okay, Bob, you want to make $100,000 a year. Here's what you got to do to get there. And if you want to buy this house, like, all right, let's go introduce you to a realtor so you can get excited about it. And then I'll help you get there. And then I tell them well, they know what the goals of the business are. So they're like, okay, if I meet the business goals, I can meet my goals. And then you start then you have your employees tell each other about their goals. And so everyone's sort of supporting each other. And I think also that helps a lot with retention because, again, if I'm helping you get what you want, you're more likely to stay with me. So selfishly, it helps me. But also, it's cool for me because I get to see you get what you want too. So it's like we're both winning. And I think, again, if you go to most business owners right now, it's like, tell me Jane's goals, tell me tell me Bob's goals. I guarantee you they have no idea. And then have the employees do that. And I guarantee you they have no idea. So I think it's just an important exercise to do for everyone. And again, talk about culture and stuff, which I'm sure we'll talk about next. Like that is, I think, a big culture builder. And like people get excited about that kind of stuff.
I'm just trying not to laugh because then you come across some business owners and say, well, how do I do that? Like, just ask them, like have a conversation with your employees and ask them the question. Like I think there's some things that we actually do make a lot harder than it needs to be.
Yeah, literally just ask. I always, like, even in interviews, I'm like, ask them, like, what do you want here? Like, why are you interviewing here? Like, how can I help you? Like, tell me your goals. Where do you see yourself in 1 to 3 years? Another question I like to ask people in interviews is like, if I give you, the magic genie lamp and the genie comes out and you get one wish, but it's got to be like the most selfish wish. You can't wish to cure cancer or like, save the gorillas. It's got to be just for you. And they tell me that, and that helps me understand a little bit about their motivations. And so if they're like, I want to live on the beach, I want to travel more, I want to make it's a great question. So I think doing that in interviews is just easy to understand. But then as you onboard them onto your team, into your organization, and you get them to like start knowing everyone else, I think that's really important to be like, hey, like, Jane, she wants to live in this neighborhood. Like, oh, I know someone that lives in that neighborhood. Like, and then it just, with time that goes on, like it just works. And then eventually they're getting what they want and you get what you want and the business just keeps growing and hopefully everyone's winning.
I love that, man. Has there been times, especially at the beginning or maybe even just recently, where you've had those one-on-ones, you have those sit-downs, and you completely misread somebody? And what happened, and like what did that teach you?
This happens all the time, man, because I think, unfortunately, for the better or for worse, people give you their best version of themselves in the interview. So like knowing that, you got to be aware of like, okay, like if they're giving me 100% now, like will they give me this version of them if they're actually working for me day to day? And the answer is probably no. But yeah, no, we've had incidences where, and I won't go into too much detail here, but we hired someone and I was like advocating for the guy, and it was like right after COVID, and then he came in and just like we took him out to dinner and just he was being inappropriate. It did not work, so we let him go like immediately. So probably a blessing in disguise that happened. But yeah, no, I think a lot of times this can happen to people, but you gotta like. And man, he interviewed like with like 10 plus people. We put him through the round stuff. Everyone checked the box, the credentials met, and so I don't think you'll ever know until like they're in your business, and it's why it's like hire slow, fire fast type of thing. But yeah, I think anyone would be lying if they said that didn't never happen.
Yeah. On that note, kind of switching over to culture, because it's kind of like what you said, like, you have a person that checked off multiple boxes with multiple people, and then it took dinner for you guys to be like, yeah, no, we're good. There's a thing that you said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. What do you mean by that specifically? Like, what does it actually mean to you?
Yeah, and I forget who said that quote, but it always stuck with me. And I think to me, it's just like, it's like when people talk about business plans, they're like, I'm going to do this amount of sales in this amount of time, and we're going to keep crushing every month over month. And like business plans to me are just like, it sounds nice, it's sort of fluffy, but it's just like, it's just a piece of paper. And I think that's sort of like strategies. And I think strategy is important to an extent, and like you should know your priorities and what to focus on and what customers to go after and stuff like that. But culture, it's just like, when things come up, when things arise, when challenges, happen, that's when like things kick into overdrive, and that's what it shows you what your organization is really made of. So like, for example, for us during COVID, we were in the food and beverage manufacturing space, right? So our business was down 85%, like
Wow.
gone, right? So we were building a new building. We put pause on that, and we were reevaluating everything. But we didn't fire anyone. We actually hired people during that time, and so people saw our organization like, okay, they're continuing to invest in us. And when the world was sort of like crumbling, we weren't just sitting there twiddling our thumbs. Everyone was like, how can we help our customers? How can we continue to grow, even when everyone's just trying to survive? And when things get better, we'll be the first ones they call. So we did like a million different things. And, when we came out of the situation, COVID, we had our best year ever after that. We had another best year after that. So I think, again, it comes down to, the people at the end of the day, but strategy is nice, but it's just like, again, like who can, like, when things get hard, who's going to show up? I think that comes with the culture.
Yeah.
And, it's creating that culture within the business to show like people that you care about them. And when you care about people, they'll care about you too, and they'll do great things for you in the company. And I think that's something, again, like it's said a lot in business books, but I don't think it's practiced enough. And culture is a thing where it's just like that takes a lot of time to develop. It takes difficult conversations. It just takes time. And again, I think it all starts with the leadership group, the leader, the founder, and I think it's just very important.
There's so many like almost different types of cultures, too, in so many ways. I know you said like, you've invested in a bunch of different businesses. You are looking at their teams. What's the difference between like, let's just say, a good vibes type of culture where it's nice and sweet, and then a high performance, like, high octane type of culture?
Yeah, again, I think it's all a byproduct of the founder, the leadership team. So however they run their life, they run their business, that's how everyone else is going to act. And just because you might be getting numbers and you might be growing, again, doesn't mean it's the most fun place to work in the world, right? Like,
Yeah.
I know a few businesses that they do well on paper, but I know a lot of people don't like working them. But like they get numbers and they achieve things and they get sales, but just because you're making a bunch of money doesn't mean that you guys have a great culture. So I think it's a little bit of everything, but to me, it's like the difference between, again, people who are, I guess, just more comfortable where they're at and someone who wants to continue to grow. I think it's all, again, a byproduct of the founder. And again, that ripple effect of how you're running the business, I think will attract those kind of people. So if you're content, you're probably going to attract sort of content people. But if you're someone who's hungry and wants to grow and cares about people, I think over time you will attract those kind of people. And then as you start building your organization, word of mouth, you'll just be known in your industry for this kind of culture. And then I think people will start actually coming to you. Like we had people, I remember one of our food scientists that we hired, we probably hired him 6 or 7 years ago. And he was like, I was waiting to work for you guys for like 10 years. And like, that was so cool to hear, like coming out of his mouth. And I was just like, why didn't we hire you earlier? And he's like, you don't have any positions open for me. And I was like, I guess that's fair. But it's like, I would have loved for you to reach out, but it's stuff like that where it's like you get known for this kind of thing. And then your customers know you for it. And again, it's this ripple effect, snowball effect. But yeah, I think it's all a byproduct of the leadership.
Would you say that's a key in terms of also making sure that as you grow and scale these companies, you're also not burning out employees?
Yeah, I mean, again, like a good business depends on good people. So if your employees are burnt out and they don't want to work, like it's going to be hard for you to grow, right? So yeah, I think it depends again on what industry you're in. I'm a big believer. I'm not like a hustle bro kind of guy. Like I think there's our entrepreneurs out there who are like, you got to grind 24/7. I think there's seasons for that kind of stuff, but I equate that to like working out in the gym 24/7. Like I can't grow my muscles if I'm constantly working out. I have to rest. So I'm just like, if I'm going to create a good culture and organization, I got to give my people time off. And like, if they want to leave at 5, like leave at 5, get to the office the next morning on time, whatever. But like, don't burn yourself out just because there's a meeting or something coming up the next day. Like we can all handle it. And I get there's those pressure situations, but I'm a big believer in rest and recovery, stuff like that. So yeah, burnout. And I think burnout also has to do with not being clear about your end goal and your end game. And I think a lot of people aren't clear about that. So they do get burnt out, not even physically, just emotionally. And so, yeah, I think there's a big issue with that and probably in the more corporate world as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to kind of drive a little bit further on that because it does seem like there's some business owners that are kind of imprisoned with their own company where that burnout is probably not going to have any end in sight. Like they're shackled to their own company. What would you say to a business owner where like they're pretty burnt out, their team is burnt out, and it's it's because like by default of how they're structured, that's just kind of that's just where they're living at the moment. What kind of advice would you give that CEO and also that team?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think unfortunately that's probably most businesses. A lot of
Oh
entrepreneurs,
yeah.
they get all excited and they're like, I'm going to quit my job and go do this thing, or they start a business and then they sort of just create themselves like a very busy, fancy job instead of becoming a business owner. And I think there's a very big difference. A business owner is a business that can run without you, you know, and then calling yourself an entrepreneur where you have got to work all the time is you got a fancy job. And so I feel like if you are burnt out, I think it's just taking a step back and getting clear on like, hey, like why did I start this business? What is my goal here? Like again, I'm shooting for 10 million in sales. Like why 10 million? Why not 9.5? Again, it's just understanding the clarity around why you're doing what you're doing. And if you need to understand and if you can get clear on that, then it's like, okay, I might need to hire the executive assistant that can help me. I might need to go hire the salesperson that can take some, weight off my shoulders, because again, I don't envy that at all. Like, I respect a lot of entrepreneurs, but if you're grinding it out and you're not working out, or like your health is getting worse, and you're not able to hang out with your family and friends, and you're not feeling fulfilled at the end of the day, that is not a win in my book. Like, I don't celebrate the grind it out kind of stuff. Like, and unfortunately, I think a lot of entrepreneurs make sort of like self-sabotage in that way. I'm actually writing a book right now that's like talks a little bit about this. It's not just about entrepreneurship, but yeah, I think, if you are burned out, like you got to get clear on what you want. I think it takes taking a step back.
Yeah, it's definitely been like over glorified, and I feel like it's probably over glorified is because people just don't know how to get out of it. And so it's like, all right, well, instead of trying to, find a, reasonable way to kind of move beyond that, let me just kind of stay there and glorify that pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, what would you say are like if you were to step into, let's just say 100 different businesses and they're on the verge of their culture actually breaking, what are signs that you pick up on that maybe most CEOs miss?
There could be a bad apple in the bunch. I don't know if you guys have seen that like picture of like, I think it's like a orange, or maybe it is an apple, where it's like a little moldy and then like the mold starts going to the other apples. You ever seen that before?
Mm-hmm.
When you like
Yeah.
get the box of blueberries at the grocery store and like the next day one's moldy and then it infested the whole box. You're like, come on, man. But I think that's a big piece of it, right? Where it's like, one, they could be great at what they do. They could be the best salesperson, the best marketer ever. But if they just suck, if they're like, a pain in the butt, if they're dragging other people down, that will infect the people around you, because whether you're aware of it or not, and I think, again, you talk about what CEOs might miss, whether you're aware of it or not, you're always making someone else feel something. The waiter at the restaurant, your flight attendant, the bartender, whatever, your employees. Everyone's always giving off an energy. So if you're giving off a bad energy, that's going to affect other people, and that will affect your environment. So I think it's being aware of who's maybe the bad apple in the bunch if the culture is being affected, and I would probably target them and be like, you got to get out of here. And then, do your due diligence and be like, it might be more than one. But I think that's a big thing that I see, at least in my limited experience doing this.
Limited experience, so humble. No, I mean that's a fair point, dude. Is being able to understand. I think a lot of business owners drive down the pathway of, all right, I kind of forgot my purpose or mission because the numbers now have maybe taken over, and you got, like you said, you got that one person who's killing it for you. Then they're a jerk. And you don't actually, that's the stuff I think doesn't show up on a profit and loss, right? At the end of the year, it's not like, here's your bad salesperson attitude expense that you had to pay. It's just, here's how much money, right? You just, how much money you made. It's like, all right, great, you guys killed it. So I think that definitely gets overlooked when you're, tying in, you're building out that culture, and you mentioned at the beginning, so to speak, that strategy for you isn't the most important, but obviously there's an aspect of running a business where you need to have a strategy. How do you just kind of tie in focusing on, as a business owner, focusing on the now while still knowing how much energy to pour into, all right, my future planning, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I think as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, you're always running two businesses. You're always running the business you have today and the business you want to have. So I think it's priorities, right? It's understanding, okay, this is where we're at now, but this is where we want to go. And so again, as a great entrepreneur, the best of the best, they're not working in the business as much as they are working on the business. So again, I think that comes with, understanding who can help me get to where I want to go. But at the same time, like if I got something today I got to deal with, I got to deal with it today. If I'm trying to sell XYZ customer tomorrow, I'm working on that today as well. So I think, again, it's picking your battles. my dad would always say, we like to elephant hunt instead of shoot with a shotgun. So like we were very precise with our goals and our strategy. And like, all right, we're going after this one, and this one. But a lot of entrepreneurs, it's like the Matrix, the woman in the red dress, like those come up all the time. And so they go
How
here and they
can
go
we
there and they go
forget?
there.
Yeah.
And there's no focus there. So for us, it's just you have to be disciplined. You got to know who you are, but again, you got to be aware of. I got a business today that I got to run. And I got a business that I gotta want to be tomorrow that I got to run as well.
Mm.
So I was gonna say, so when you're, you pointed out with entrepreneurs that they're all over the place sometimes, or maybe I don't want to call it shiny object syndrome, but it's just a challenge picking out what's the priorities that I need to focus on. So I got 25 things and they're all important and they're all urgent. When it's like, all right, it's really only like 3. So how do you, if you had to give somebody an advice, just like, I just feel like I'm all over the place. What would you say for them to be able to really buckle down on the more important things and pick the right priorities?
I would just say take a breath, chill out. Again, I think, again, a lot of entrepreneurs are like, they think everything's important at once, again, which is really not. I don't think if it's not going to, put you out of business the next day, if it's not going to put you out of business the next week, I don't know if it's the most important thing. But again, it's all going to be industry dependent. That's a tough question to answer, but I guess unless maybe a key employee's leaving or something detrimental is about to happen, it could probably wait till tomorrow. Like, that's just how I see it.
Now, you've worked with some rather large companies, McDonald's, Chick-fil-A. I'm just actually curious because obviously their mentality is a lot different. And what are some things that maybe they look at, some things in business that they look at drastically different than small businesses do, that maybe a small business would be better off if they actually looked at it like the big boys?
Yeah, I would say, we're talking about strategy a little bit. I think it's systems. I think McDonald's probably does it the best in maybe even any industry. They call it the three-legged stool. Their proprietary system, but like they are buckled up. It's very, very, they should do multiple case studies. If you want to learn business, yeah, like literally listen or read a McDonald's case study. But, these businesses scale because, again, they have systems. They understand like, all right, this is what we got to do for supply chain. This is how we got to open restaurants. It's just a repeatable system. This is how we have to onboard new suppliers. It's just repetition and systems. Obviously, that gets better over time. But I would say these big companies are big for a reason. They had great systems, they had great people, and they just let time play out, and they scaled. And obviously, the product was good too. That's debatable, I guess, depending on who you're talking. McDonald's or Chick-fil-A, and I won't get into that right now, but I think they're both good.
Man, give me that spicy chicken deluxe all day, every day. So, yeah, you actually said that if you don't have a system, you can't scale. And so, what is kind of the first system you recommend maybe for the smaller players to implement first if they're chaotic and kind of don't have anything? What would you say is like, hey, get this and this in place first, and then at that point it's going to be a little bit easier?
Again, a lot of context could be lost here, but I would say for me, it's just looking at my calendar. And so if I'm like booked up with meetings and like it's just back to back to back to back, and I got no time for myself, then it's like, okay, who do I got to hire to help me with this stuff? If I'm on more sales calls, it's like I probably got to hire the salesperson. If I am doing more admin work, I might need to hire someone like an assistant. And then to them, it's just like I like a few things here. There's ways where you can teach people things. So it's like if you have a way of doing things that have worked for you, you can maybe record it on your computer, or you can teach them in person, and then as you're training them, they eventually get the hold of it, hopefully, and they're not going to be exactly like what you do, but then they can do it and they can teach other people. So for me, I would say auditing your calendar is probably the best first step, and then like organizing that so you have a little bit of breathing room, and then you can organize your life a little bit better and figure out who you need to hire and start training them in that order. But there's so many systems, like EOS is a good one. I've never done it, but I've read the book, and I know a lot of people. It's called Entrepreneur's Operating System, I think it stands for. Yep. But I know a lot of smaller businesses love that. I think the same kind of book is called Traction. Yep. I read that a long time ago, which is a decent one, I've heard. But yeah, I don't have like an exact I have a playbook for like some industries that I'm in, but as far as like systems, depending on the industry, I think that's a different answer.
So right now you were talking about essentially two things. One is the people component and then the system component. When do you prioritize systems over people? And then when do you prioritize people over the systems?
I'm always people first, man. I think people, again, it's got to be the right people. So again, loaded question here, but they're both important. But the way I look at things, again, it's just like you talk about when we were talking earlier about like how do you do this? How do you find out about your employees? Well, you just ask them. And so I think the biggest thing for me, it's just, if I find good people, I can't. It's hard to train attitude. Like it's hard to train enthusiasm. Like just being excited to show up for work. But I can probably train you how to sell something. How to be a better leader. Like that stuff that's trainable. We can read some books about that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So I would rather look for the people 100% of the time and then implement the system, because I'm not the biggest, as much as I do love systems, I think also systems can get in the way of results. Like sometimes you got to break the fucking playbook. Like, can I curse on here?
Whoa.
Too late.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Yeah.
Um, but sometimes sometimes you got to break the playbook a little bit. And I think that's just like, as much as I do love having a system and like having structure in my business, whether that's, implementing a CRM, or accounting software, whatever that is, I think sometimes you got to break the rules, and then some people get upset by that. Me, I sort of like that because I'm not really a rule follower. But if the results got to get done, if I gotta do something immediately and I gotta break some rules, I'm gonna do that too. So, but for me, it's always people.
I want to do a tiny shift, but obviously a big theme here is also leadership. You mentioned multiple times, starts at the top. What's one personal growth habit that actually I want to ask you first made a huge difference for you? And then the second part of that would be, what do you think is one thing that leaders who are maybe not exactly where they want to be, one personal growth habit that they should start right away?
Another good question. I would say for me, again, it was just spending some time by myself and getting clear on like, what do I want? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And then I can recommend tons of books and stuff like that. But I think for me, it's like, again, when I'm showing up to the office, it's like being aware of my energy, my state, getting to know people a little bit better, like taking people out to lunch. So I think for me, the personal development stuff it's all encompassing. I think this is much more than just leadership at the end of the day, honestly. Business to me is just one category of life, in my opinion. But I think if you do want to be a better leader, it definitely starts with looking yourself in the mirror, being honest with yourself, and being like, "Hey, this just popped in my head too. I think another thing that's not talked about enough is probably your fitness as well. Like when you see someone who's in shape, like you automatically know, like they're probably a little bit disciplined to an extent, right? Hopefully they can apply that discipline for their body, for their business. But I think that's another thing too, where it's like, if you're not the most in shape, that can be a big boost to your leadership as well. Like you get to know yourself through that process as well. You show up better for yourself, you start showing up better for other people. So I think that's another big one too, that if you are an entrepreneur and you're not in the best shape, like push the meeting tomorrow and go to the gym, dude. Like I would recommend that as number one, because when you work out too, you're going to also be in such a better mindset too. Like your brain, I do it more for my brain than I do for my body. I feel like it at this point. Like literally before I hopped on here, I went and worked out at the gym, and then I hopped in the sauna and then did a cold plunge after, and it's like it makes me feel good.
Mhm.
Hey, you feel good, you work good, right? I know. I mean, but I think that's something we tend to push to the side. Like you said, you get in that grind mode, and it's just all right. To your point, what's more important right now, meeting or my workout? If I work out, it's a little selfish about me. I'm not working on the company, but then
It's selfish and selfless at the same time,
yeah,
right? Because if you don't have health, you got nothing. Like
go,
when I'm sick, it's like, dude, I'd pay so much money to not be sick right now. Everyone knows that feeling.
yes.
But if I can't take care of myself, how am I supposed to take care of my company? So it's I think it's one of the most important things you need to be doing as a business leader. I mean, just in life in general, right? Like for your family, for your friends, for yourself, for your community. Like you got to take care of yourself. So for me, health is always number one.
How do you actually keep yourself balanced with all that? And then if you're working with maybe another owner or even just director and another executive, how do you also maybe help them stay grounded and having that balance, so to speak? Yeah, and I'm not talking like balance as in time, but just that balance, like you said, quality of life and whatnot.
I can't change other people, but I think the best example you can, or the best thing you can do for other people is be the example. Like if I'm working out, if I'm taking care of myself, hopefully that just ripples effect across my business and maybe my business partners. But hopefully you never have to deal with that at the end of the day because you chose someone who's also into this kind of stuff. I mean, choosing a business partner is really important. I mean, family is one thing, so it's not really chosen, I guess. I mean, I think it is at the end of the day, it's all chosen. Like you don't have to start a business. You don't got to do anything. But I think being the example is the best thing you can do. And then if one day they might wake up and be like, "Hey, dude, like, hey, Dan, like, hey, how did you get into, like, where are you going to work out? Like, oh, I got this trainer. Like, what books are you reading?" Like, I think that just stuff just naturally happens. And I think people don't like to be told what to do all the time. Like, if I came in and was like, "You guys got to work out more," you'd probably be like, "Dude, screw this Justin guy." But like, if I kept showing up, they'd be like, "Oh, Justin's looking a little better. Like, these guys are looking better." I think that's how you get people on board.
By example, absolutely. So we talked about, the importance of like reading books, and we talked about kind of the leadership side of things, being grounded, health. What's interesting to me is I think that there's, CEOs that, definitely do their fair share of reading in those areas. And to sell a business in a space multiple times throughout generations, I kind of want you to dive into the importance of just being smart, of just intelligence, of just like, being abreast on a particular industry that you're in, and, getting into books that really expand on well, I guess just making you smarter, I guess you could say, but specifically on that, if that makes sense, like not just spirituality and everything else, but like being smart, being a fucking like the smartest person in your room, and putting in the effort to be that.
Well, I feel like I'm usually the dumbest person in the room. That's why I got to read all the time, because I'm trying to learn from some of the
Isn't
greats that
that
came before me, right? Like,
isn't that some
I think,
shit? Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's, I don't want to say maybe narcissistic's the word, but I think it's crazy of you not to read if you are a business owner, because that's just telling the world, like, I know everything. And to me, it's like, okay, well, Charlie Munger's dead now. I can't learn from him anymore, but like he's got books. Like Warren Buffett, one of the greatest of all time. You think he's got some wisdom that he can instill in me? And so for me, like these are just some of the books behind me. I got plenty more. And so I'm a big believer in always be learning. I think you should, read every day, 15 minutes, 30 minutes every day. Jim Rohn is like one of the OG personal development guys. He always talks about miss a meal, but never miss reading a book. And I believe that as well. And it's just like, it's changed my life probably more than anything, the mentors that I've had in my life. And mentors can be a book, they can be an in-person mentor, they can be a podcast, a YouTube video. And I think looking back, it's just like, I've learned so much from other people. And I think the smartest business owners out there understand, like, usually you only learn from mistakes for the most part, but smart business owners understand they don't have to be your mistakes. So if I can read, a book about how Warren Buffett scaled his business, and I can learn from his mistakes, I can apply that to myself, so I don't have to make his mistake. You could probably save $1 million from some of these books behind me that cost $20. And so I don't think I'm smart, really. I think like I've learned a lot of stuff, but to me, it's just like a lot of people, I think too, like you mentioned spirituality, that's like something I'm a believer in, but I think some people think too, like, you might hear this in business too, like all the answers are within you, like just follow your intuition. And to an extent that is true, but it's like, I didn't learn Spanish sitting in my room meditating. I didn't learn business sitting in my room. I didn't learn how to read a P&L statement just like sitting in my room. I had to go learn that from thing. I had to go do the thing, and I had to read a book on it. So I think as you are doing, you should always be learning. And I think that combination is lethal. And I think unfortunately, most entrepreneurs don't do it because they are so busy. But if you don't have time to read a book, like if you're driving to the office, like do an audiobook instead of listening to music or radio, or like find 15 minutes a day to read. Like I think there's a reason Warren Buffett is so successful. He literally says, I read all the time. Like Elon Musk growing up was saying he read 2 books a day. I don't think that's a coincidence.
Mm-hmm. No, I don't either. And I know you said a couple times on the podcast, like it's a loaded question, but I think on that one, I definitely gave you a bit of a loaded question, because for me, the smartest people that I have ever met in my fucking life, they all say the same thing. They're like, I feel really dumb. And it's like, the more I know that I don't know. And it's just this huge wealth, like this ocean of knowledge out there. And I'm just trying to do my part to recognize patterns. That's a big one. Just pattern recognition is like pattern recognition with people, with markets, with finance, with operations. And so that way I won't get blindsided, or if something does happen, I feel pretty equipped and confident that I can overcome it. And it's just because I'm well read and then also well experienced, and I'm just not sitting here because you mentioned like, learning Spanish, meditating, but also, there's a lot of books on fighting, on like boxing, for example. Like you kind of got to get in the ring and get punched in the mouth and actually do it. So no, I totally agree with you.
I'm just curious, man, what book actually made the biggest difference for you? And I haven't read as much.
That's the hardest. That's the most loaded question of all, man.
I've read like 1,000, but no, or maybe like, what's the biggest takeaway from everything? Yeah.
I'll give you 2, because that is like the hardest question. People ask me that all the time. They're like, if you had to pick one book, I'm like, dude, that's so hard. And they're not business books actually. So one is Man's Search for Meaning. I don't know if you guys have read that by Viktor Frankl.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
about the Holocaust survivor, his story was amazing. So I think that story in and of itself, everyone unfortunately should read that and learn from him, because I think it just teaches you about the superpower you really have within you. And then number two would be Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins. You can see it right here. I think there's so much amazing content in that book. I think, Tony Robbins he did change my life, and I'm very fortunate I get to work with him now, one of his foundations. But those two books probably, I love the business books and stuff, but there's never been like one thing that I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, this is mind blowing. There's been a lot of little tactical stuff from multiple books. But I'm a big believer in two, and Tony talks about this a lot as well, where he says business is 80% psychology, 20% tactics. I'm a huge believer in that. And that's when I talk about people, culture, mindset. I think that's the stuff, again, that's not really taught. And I think mindset, especially for entrepreneurs, like a lot of entrepreneurs, they beat themselves up and they stay down for a long time and they don't learn from their mistakes and they don't get back up quickly. And I think it's really important to, when you do get knocked down, feel it. Don't judge yourself too much. Get back up and learn and then keep going forward. But the best entrepreneurs, they get knocked down and they self-soothe quickly and they get back up and keep going. But the mindset that comes behind that too, figure it out when things get challenging. You don't got to know everything, but if you can read the books, if you can keep going, if you can find someone who's been there, done that before you, but to have that mindset of continuous learning and continuous growth, like to want to be great, that's very rare in my opinion.
I want to get your opinion on this, because I do agree of the power of books. And there's actually quite a few clients where I had one recently where I told them, like, you got to read Man's Search for Meaning. And it's because like you are just being too fucking soft. you couldn't punch yourself out of a white paper bag. Like you're not even Charmin Ultra. You're just regular plywood toilet paper, like just the stuff inside of an airplane. And but there's also other times where I be like, you got to read a story. Like, we are a storytelling species. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the power of stories. And you mentioned Elon Musk. When he was asked, what is a book that people should read, and he said, Lord of the Rings. And then Mark Andreessen, another multi-billionaire, one of the smartest dudes, one of his books was Snow Crash, was another story. Where does the power of stories fit in your world when it comes to personal development and also extracting business principles that are kind of in story form?
Yeah, man, dude, storytelling is a force multiplier. I think if you want to learn a skill set for business and in life, like, get good at storytelling. It's something I'm still working on. I was actually hanging out with Jesse Itzer, if you know who he is. I was hanging out with him a few weeks ago. Yeah. He had a speaking event, and I was working on my storytelling, and he gave me live feedback after I gave a speech, and that was really cool. And I got to learn from other speakers, and that in and of itself, I think, will change your life. But dude, stories, like I said, that's why I read all these books. I want to learn the stories. I want to learn how Warren built his business. I want to learn how Tony became Tony Robbins. I want to learn from Gandhi. Like, even in Gandhi's book, I think I read this the other day, he talks about how he believes in the power of the guru, submitting himself to smarter people. I listened and I saw that and I was like, dude, if Gandhi is reading and like submitting himself to people and he's Gandhi, like, I got to read. I have to read so much. I got to read more because I'm not Elon. I'm not Jeff Bezos. And I think, talking about books, mentioning Bezos, like, he first started selling books. So this one little thing, that's just, I think, the power of stories. They are so powerful. And yeah, stories have changed my life, man.
Out of so take all those lessons, and I'm talking to you as a struggling business owner. You got to boil everything down. But I'm going to ask you, what's one thing that I'm struggling with as a owner? What's one thing I can just start doing right away? Like, one simple thing that will help me make a shift. You talking about Tony Robbins, he says, what is it? Make the smallest little shift can create like a massive difference, right? So what would be that one thing that you would tell me if I was just got a business doing okay, but I'm really kind of struggling. I don't got my shit together and I'm just looking for help?
I guess it also depends on the context. I mean, I could tell you maybe it needs to get worse before it gets better for you to take action. I could tell you read. I could tell you go hire a coach. I could tell you, like, I would ask you a bunch of questions. They'd be like, what do you want out of this thing? Like, why are you doing what you're doing again? I think one thing is challenging, but for me, I think if I had to give anyone advice, I think reading is a big plus, especially nowadays where like AI is like here and everyone just wants to ask ChatGPT everything and no one's thinking for themselves anymore. I think reading is a superpower. It's like it's working out for your brain. So I think just find some good books and read. I think that will do a lot for you, but I think it's coming down to your desire. And if you are struggling, like, Antonio was saying, like, dude, you're just soft, bro. Like, that made me crack up because I have the same opinion. I think most entrepreneurs, like, I've been to a lot of entrepreneur events. I've met a ton of these guys, and I like most of them. But yeah, a lot of them are just soft, dude. And it's like, it's like we got to do something about mindset. Like, why weren't we taught mindset in school? So that's why I mentioned, it might have to get worse before it gets better. But I don't want to leave people in the dust like that. But I'm always trying to be encouraging and help people believe in themselves a little more. So I guess it would just depend on what you want out of it.
No, I really do love that, man. Like, that people can get grittier. That you're just noticing, like, okay, I know we're saying like they're soft, but it's really saying like, dude, you can be grittier. You can dig deep. You can get out of it. You can, Viktor Frankl was just like any other person. He was just under, extraordinary circumstances, and he decided to look within and be grateful, even in the most dire of circumstances, and being in Auschwitz, right? And that's anybody. Like, anybody can do that. You can dig deep and just take it to another level.
100%, man. I think life is very comfortable nowadays. I think perspective is something a lot of people are lacking. I know I did a little bit growing up, and I had to like hit my head against the wall a few times. Like, school was really tough for me just because I just struggled in the classroom and didn't like it. But my life was pretty good. But I really didn't like school, so I had a tough time. But I think, yeah, for the most part, we are lacking a perspective of like being grateful and like being able to realize like I can choose how I feel every day. And the poorest people in this country, they live better than the kings did, like thousands of years ago. So we have to realize like, hey, life is pretty good now. Like if I woke up and I'm healthy and my family's healthy, like I'm pretty much winning. And then everything on top of that is just like, all right, now let's put into work to get to where I want to go. And it can be challenging, but those challenging moments, like a lot of people see them as things that they beat them up, but like I see those as like things I can absorb that can make me better. And if like I have competition that's I like if you're my competition in business, like that's my one curse for you is like let everything affect you. Like, but if you're a beast, it's like you're like a rock and you're basically just like I'm unaffected. Not to say that you're like stoic, you don't have feelings, but you just keep going and you let things. You're like Thanos. You like absorb the stones and you just get better and better and better. And I think the best entrepreneurs, like I was saying earlier, they do that. They have that one skill. And I think again, it's back to the psychology piece, what I mentioned earlier.
I will say, you guys talk about the soft owners. They're just the people who can't really handle much, if at all. And I'm like, just honestly thinking about myself. Like, I know that's how I used to be. I'd be afraid to do the smallest little shit just because, like, what if they don't like me? Or what if, the call doesn't go that well? And then you talk yourself out of even doing something small. So, and it's interesting as I'm listening to you, I'm like, man, what got me out of that? Right. And it's like really focusing, going back to the beginning point you made, is really focusing on what do you actually want to achieve in life? What do you want to accomplish? And I think like for me, that's the question I started asking is like, is this helping me? Do I actually understand what I want? And then is the stuff that I'm doing every single day actually getting me closer to that? Right. Versus I'm not making the call or I'm not learning the lesson. I'm crumbling under the pressure. I'm like, my life's just basically shit. I mean, not, compared to speak, it's not shit, but it's not where I want to be. It wasn't that great. It's like, all right, how do I get out of this? And that's a great point, mate. Is like we have the ability to kind of pull ourselves out of the situation, especially most often than not, we're the ones that made the situation.
Yeah, and it's easy to say now looking back. Like obviously we're all in those moments where like this sucks, right? But I think when you do look back at those moments, they're like a blessing because you realize like when the days aren't as fun, and then when the days are good, you realize how good the days really are. But yeah, I think it's just understanding, what you're focusing on, what it means, what you're going to do about it. Tony talks a lot about this too, but yeah, that's why I'm a big believer in psychology too, like understanding your own psychology. That's why I was mentioning like the personality test, the psychological test. I think that's really important. I think if you had to boil down, all of personal development, the two words is just know yourself. And again, once you know yourself more, life just gets a whole lot better in all aspects. But it is hard, man. Like, cause we have this brain that's like perfectly wired, but for like 75,000 years ago. And so it's like a wild horse, and you got to put the reins on the horse. And sometimes you get the reins on there and it's nice. And then sometimes it bucks you off. You got to put the reins back on, but it's work. Like you're physically rewiring how you live in your brain. So it is going to take intentional repetition time. And, you talk about recognizing patterns. Like we all are basically living with patterns. Like I can prove it to y'all right now. If you cross your arms, like if you guys just literally just cross your arms and you try to do it the other way, it feels weird. And like we have these patterns of thinking, we have these patterns of, and thinking and beliefs, and that dictates our life because we How we think and how we believe things will dictate our decisions. And so if we're not aware of that kind of stuff, and then if we're not aware of it, it's just not going to change. But when you become aware of it, then you got to physically rewire how you think about things. And that literally, it's physical in your brain with the neurons and all that stuff. And, the neurochemistry, and I'm going to butcher that. You guys probably know more about that than I do, but it's tough. It's tough. But once you get it though, life gets way better, but it's still work. It's never ending.
Yeah, it's every day.
I think that's a perfect place to end it. Is know yourself. Life gets better in all aspects. Justin, it was a pleasure having you on. If someone wants to connect with you, get to know you a little bit better, what is the best way that people can do that?
Yeah, just find me on Instagram. It's just Justin M. Block. My website's Justin M. Block, and I also have a podcast with my buddy Nick Ralston. Used to play in the NFL, called Born to Be Great. If you want to check that out.
Absolutely. Hey, man,
awesome.
Thank you so much, dude. And this was awesome. Learned a lot, and we definitely gave people some amazing value today.
Yeah, no doubt. It's phenomenal.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yep.
Absolutely.